Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hi, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig. The idea behind my podcast is to pay homage to humankind for the beautiful things that we have done both individually and collectively. And I think that's extraordinarily important, particularly nowadays when there's somewhat of a cloud hanging over us. Um, we have to be cognizant of really the creativity which surrounds us, which we are responsible for. So I like to do that through inspirational interviews. Today, my guest is Amir Kovacs. How are you, Amir?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm great. I'm great. I'm going to tell you a bit about Amir in a moment. But suffice it to say right now that he is a filmmaker. He is also a doctor, or has the title doctor, and a few other things that he's accomplished in his life. What I would like you to take out of the interview as we go is the idea that there are so many different pieces to our life, and very often those pieces will change. We'll try something else. We'll launch into a new area of life, be it a career or in a relationship or personally. And I think that's very important for us to be cognizant of, not to get stuck in one place. That if something is not making you happy, to move on from there and to try something new. Let your heart be excited and on fire, because that's what life is all about. So let me tell you about my guest today. His name is Amir Kovacs, and he is the producer and he is the co-writer of the book of Joshua, Walls of Jericho, an Old Testament tale, and it's an animated movie. This beautifully put together movie takes viewers on a powerful and epic biblical journey of faith, courage, and triumph. The book of Joshua, Walls of Jericho, recounts the story told in the Old Testament, which is the book of Joshua itself, following the Israelites' conquest of Canaan and the delivery of the Promised Land. This was after 40 years of great oppression, suffering, and famine following their liberation from slavery in Egypt. The book of Joshua, Walls of Jericho, won Best Animated Film at the 2025 Hollywood Independent Film Festival. It was also an official selection of the 2025 International Christian Film and Music Festival, where it is nominated in 5 categories. Amir is an actor, a screenwriter, and a film producer who follows the line of Eleanor Roosevelt, who once said, "You must do the things you think you cannot do." It's a good thing to live by, isn't it?
It's fantastic, in my opinion. It's the only way to confront your fears and to actually do something that you think is practically impossible.
And,
It's all.
and is the creation of this animated film, is that one of those things?
Oh, absolutely. I wrote the screenplay many years ago, and without knowing what it is to make a movie. I have written so many screenplays since, because it's easier to write the screenplay as opposed to making an actual movie out of a screenplay.
Yeah.
You know, um, I think that once you tackle a beast, whatever that may be, um, the idea of tackling, the idea of making that kind of decision, I think right there you've surpassed all your fears.
Well, it's an
So
interesting thing, though, because I find that if I have the courage to do the same, to dive into an area that I'm completely not comfortable with or know anything about, that at some point I get scared and I
mhm.
ask myself, what the heck am I doing? Is that what happens?
Absolutely, absolutely, because you're not. This is out of your comfort zone completely.
Yeah.
And the second you become comfortable being uncomfortable, as long as you know how to direct yourself or listen to others, because we all do everything with the help of others, um, I think you can accomplish quite a bit. It's any kind of fear, any kind of phobia that we may have. In my personal opinion, the best way to overcome it is by tackling it, facing it.
And have you been like this since you're a kid?
Not necessarily. Yes and no in many ways. In many ways, as a child, I was pretty bashful. I was I stayed away from confrontation, but on the other hand, I was a good athlete. And
Mm.
because of that, I felt very comfortable on the field, maybe soccer or tennis or anything else we've done. I was a pretty athletic little scrawny kid, a typical Israeli running the streets.
Yes. Yeah.
But if you put me in front of the audience, I would become very bashful.
Mhm.
And I had to figure out a way to tackle that.
How did you do that, Amir?
I put myself in front of the audience.
How did you know to do that?
I think it was what, in many ways, the military taught me quite a bit, my personal military experience. And I think at some point I was forced to be in front of the audience in many ways. And I said, I think I kind of like it. And once I gained the confidence of doing that, I even did some stand-up comedy, which is now you're really being judged.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
you better be funny. You better
Yeah,
say something good.
because if you're not, man, you see floods of people out there not laughing, not smiling. It's the most difficult thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I moved from Israel to America, it was always a new beginning. Um, I read a book by Deepak Chopra, and he said, if you can close your eyes, and something on the lines of, if you can close your eyes and float in space where everything is dark around you, when you open your eyes, imagine it's a new beginning. So how would you make your life different? And I think that's what I did. I closed my eyes. I was in a deep space, a dark space, and I said, I'm going to open my eyes right now. I'm going to meet a whole new beginning. So whereas in Israel, I was a absolute horrible student because I had no interest of being in school whatsoever. All of a sudden in America, I'm on a scholarship, academic scholarship, on a dean's list, to a point that I told my father, and he said, yeah, send me that letter so I can see it for myself.
Let me see it.
So it's almost like I got reborn in America. This is great.
I just attended the Nova Musical Fest exhibition here in Toronto.
Yeah.
And there was a young woman who spoke at the end who was a survivor of Nova. Her name is Elle, and I can't remember her last name. Extremely erudite, very articulate, 24 years old, and stood up there in front of us and told us the most harrowing scenario as to what occurred in her life, losing 6 friends on October 7th.
Mhm.
And she concluded it with a quote, and the quote was, when you think that you're being buried, consider that instead you're being replanted.
That's a very good quote.
Right. And I thought that was highly significant. I want to give people a little bit more of a context of your background and so that they can better understand your life's journey. You were born in Haifa in the early 70s.
Yep.
Your father was a doctor, correct?
Correct.
Is he still with us, your father?
He is. Both my mother and my father are with us.
Oh, very good. Thank God. How are they?
They're doing great. We just came from a little vacation in Italy. They're doing fantastic.
Oh, sweet. Very good. Very good. And does your father have nachas from you? Does he have pride in you?
I hope so.
Does he tell you, son, I have pride in you? Does he tell you that?
Yeah, it's usually with son, you need to grow up a little bit.
Right.
But I think now, finally, at my age, he's very happy with me.
Good. I'm happy to hear it. So your educational sort of journey was it's a fascinating one. You got your diploma in architecture, and then you actually you moved to the States, as you said, and you went on to study medicine.
Yes.
And you became a doctor, in fact. And then after that, at some point, you decided that your true passion was theater, was acting, was all of that.
Right.
It's a very interesting sort of trajectory. While you were there, were you comfortable with what was going on? Were you, like, I read an article in the Jewish Standard about you. They said you just couldn't figure out what to do. And I don't know if that was fair or not. Perhaps you were very aware. Okay, I studied medicine. I did well. I have this in my back pocket. What was that like for you?
I think I went to medicine for the wrong reason. I was always as a kid, I was always the guy that cared for others. So medicine was the natural path. But I think I went to medicine because my father is a doctor. And I think I wanted to show to the world or to my parents that I can do the same thing. My parents never pushed me to go to medicine. People think, oh, he's Jewish. Of course, it's either medicine or law.
Yeah.
My brother went to law school and he's an actor in Israel. He doesn't even practice law. So I can see why people would think, oh, of course he would go to either medicine or law. But no, they never pushed me to do any of that. I think it was all me trying to think or convince myself, oh, I got to make my parents proud. I have to go to medical school. The film industry was always something that I've enjoyed. It was always a passion of mine and my biggest fear, to be before the camera.
Yes.
And that's why I tackled that. So I graduated medical school. I wrote a screenplay about the escape of my grandparents from communist Hungary post-war. And I sent it out to festivals. And one day, my daughter was 3 years old in Atlanta, Georgia. I get a phone call and it says, caller ID not found. And that's usually my parents calling from Israel.
Yeah.
So I picked up the phone and all of a sudden I hear, is this Amir? I said, yes. It goes, hi, Amir, it's Jay Leno.
Yeah. Great story.
Okay. Hi, Jay Leno. And he goes, my wife got a hold of your screenplay. How can I help you? I said, well, I need Steven Spielberg's number. I need Tom Hanks. I need money. I need to know how to make a movie. I need everything.
Yeah.
And then he goes, Amir, listen, it's a great screenplay. And he says, and he brainstorms with me. And he says, you let me know when you make a movie. And I said, well, Jay, I'm going to let you know when I make a movie. And that was my, I guess, that's what I needed to hear. That type of legitimacy, that I think that's my calling. So I called my mother and I said, horrible phone call.
Why?
I said, hey, Mom, I'm not going to be a doctor anymore. I think I'm going to go be an actor and a writer and a producer. I know nothing about it, but I think I'm going to figure it out.
And she said,
and I think she was completely shocked.
what's that?
She goes, what are you talking about? She goes, and I said, listen, I'm going to stay in medicine. I'm going to do some postgraduate work in cardiology and family medicine. And I'm going to see what I really want to do. Maybe I'll find something. Surgery was always something. I've done a year of that. But really, my passion was film. And that's how this whole thing started.
What did your dad say?
I think my dad, in many ways, said, you got your degree, so now you can follow your dreams. That's what he said to my brother as well. You both got your degrees. They're good degrees, so just follow your dreams. And that's what we're doing. And my brother had more of a nerve. My younger brother, 6 years younger, had more of a nerve to do it way before me.
He did.
I dragged it a little bit longer.
So he inspired you.
Definitely inspired me.
And he knows that.
Of course, he knows that.
Yeah.
He was bribed by my late grandmother. She said, Ilan, I will buy you a condo in Tel Aviv. Just please practice law instead of being a clown on TV. And he said, as long as you buy me a condo and you pay for my therapist for practicing law.
That's what he says. Good response.
Yeah.
Good response. By the way, just the conclusion of that story with Jay Leno was that you actually got the process of making a movie together. I think you had a producer, a director. You went to the location to scout it out.
Yeah.
And you had the cash, and then your guy dies. The money guy dies, right?
The money guy dies. Yes, I found a big producer out of Hungary and a very big director out of Hungary. And I went to Hungary. We scouted for locations. We went over the actors. I was supposed to play the role of my late grandfather, whom I've never met. It was the most exciting time of my life at the time. And nobody could believe it. His very first screenplay within a couple of years is going to make a multi-million-dollar production. And I'm like, so it's not that difficult because it's just so easy right now, right? And people in the industry said, Amir, this is pretty amazing. We had press releases, we had everything. And then one day I get a phone call that he passed away.
Oh, yeah. How did you
Yeah.
feel? Do you remember? Do you remember what it was like?
You know, you feel you feel guilty in many ways, because first thing you say, how dare he, mess up my production. But on the other hand, the man just died. He left a wife, he left a child. I met him, I broke bread with them, I liked him. And then all of a sudden you feel so bad for them. And it is what it is, It's not meant to be. Not right now.
I had a similar circumstance. I started up a nonprofit here in Toronto. It's a Jewish humanitarian organization. We worked in the streets with the homeless, and we also traveled internationally and did medical care in the rainforests of Guyana,
Wow.
Zimbabwe, and other such places. Anyways, a couple of years into the organization, I approached this philanthropist, and I asked him for $1 million. And his response to me was, yeah, I think that's doable. And when you're canvassing, have you ever canvassed for anything before? I guess for your films, right?
Yeah.
And when someone says yes, it's very unexpected, because people usually say no.
Correct.
Anyways, I was high as a kite. A few weeks later, he died.
Yeah. I mean, it's
right.
Yeah.
This free spirit that you have and that you were able to actualize. I know that you have a daughter, and your daughter is in the IDF, in Israel's army.
Correct.
Is she a free-spirited young woman as well?
She is. She's very she's very special. Of course, any father would say that about his daughter.
Yes.
But she's special in many ways. She has been through so much. She's been there when my ex-wife and I got divorced at a very delicate age for her. She was 13. She championed through so many adversities in her life, may it be club soccer, may it be school, may it be anything and everything that made her who she is today. And she's a complete warrior and very free-spirited, and bounces her ideas off of me. And I tried to be as more of an advisor and a father and a role model to her, which leads me to, I'll explain later why I made this film as well. Another reason. She's completely free-spirited, and she's just the biggest heart and a beautiful girl.
I often say about my son, who's 19 years old, an only child, I've said he's exactly the child I want. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
May I ask you what your daughter is doing in the IDF?
Yeah. So she's currently in a combat unit. She's a commander, not an officer yet, in a combat unit, and they're in charge of the West Bank area.
So she's actually a fighter, like a physical warrior.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that?
I don't sleep much. I don't sleep much for many, many reasons. October 7th hit everybody differently. I mean, we do have a common denominator. It was a very painful day. But then, we all know people, right? And it hit me very differently, mainly because I have a first degree relationship with people that got affected. May it be high school friends, may it be the kids of high school friends. Soldiers or those in the back. And then when my daughter decided to join the IDF, and I was completely okay with it, I thought it would be a good thing for her. She wanted to be part of the culture, develop camaraderie. She wanted to tell stories similar to the stories that I told her when she was growing up of my time in the IDF. I did not expect October 7th to happen. So when I consented her to be a combat soldier, even though she's an only child and I needed to consent, I did not know that 2 weeks later, October 7th would happen. And then it did. And then I said to myself, okay, she's going to go through basic training. That's going to take another 4 months. By then it'll be over. It wasn't over. Then she's going to go through advanced training. It's another 3 months. By then it'll surely be over. It's not over. Now she's fully trained. and it's still not over. So now I know I'm in trouble. When she calls me and says, "Hey, I'm not going to have the phone available for 2 weeks or 1 week," I know what that means.
Mhm.
So it's not easy, but I'm extremely proud. I pray for her and I pray for every single one of them over
Amen.
there, all
Amen.
of it, every single one of them, in the front, in the back, on the ground, in the air, in the water, every single one of them. So I'm very antsy because of everything. And obviously, because I'm here in America and my only child is over there. Thank God my parents are there and my brother.
So I've interviewed a lot of IDF soldiers since October 7th.
Mhm.
One such individual is Nir Mamon, who's 48 years old. He lives in Toronto, originally born in Israel, and he's been called up 6 times since October 7th.
Mhm.
They actually started a pluga, a group of soldiers, um, basically for people who are over 40. So you
Yep.
have people in that pluga, some of whom are 60 years old,
Yep.
but they're fighters. They're warriors at heart.
Yep.
And I've interviewed mothers and fathers of hostages or former hostages. And the thing that I always wonder about, Amir, is what do you do with that antsiness that you call it? With that feeling in your gut and your thoughts in your head when you're trying to sleep. How have you sort of been able to manage that?
Um, you know, you're busy. You're busy with your work. You're busy with everything you can do. You're busy with trying to promote what we really stand for as a country and as a nation, as people. You're trying to help as much as you can in every possible way. You're trying to stay in touch with her as much as I can. Um, Life 360 is not a good idea, because it tells you where she is in many ways, and in many ways it doesn't. And then you have to guess. You try to keep busy and talk to people. I belong to a group of other parents whom their kids are in the IDF right now as lone soldiers. And that's how you deal with it. You just deal with it. You don't have a choice but to deal with it. And that's just what we do as people. You know, I called my mother and I said, "I think I understand you now. Because during the Yom Kippur War, my mother had a brother and a husband
Mm.
fighting a very vicious war. One was in Egypt, one was in Syria. When I was a soldier, or the Lebanon War, 1982, 83, my father was all the way in Beirut. And then me, I was a soldier. And I told my mom, "How did you do it?"
Mhm, mhm.
And she said, "I have no clue how I did it." So it's a big shout out to all the Israeli mothers out there.
Unbelievable, right?
It's truly unbelievable. I mean, I'm I'm one of the Israeli mothers right now.
You are. That's right. Well,
Because
what is your mom's character like?
oh, she's a very strong woman. She's a natural leader, strong woman, determined, problem solver. I mean, she's incredible. She is the anchor of this family.
She is.
Oh, 100%.
And
100.
your father's character, what is he like?
My father's a surgeon. So if you've ever met one, that's the one. He's very good at what he does, very compassionate but very firm.
Mhm.
Um, Grew up to his my grandmother. His dad died pretty young, and my father did everything for his mother, and he did everything for our family because he was an only child. He wanted to make sure that he's got at least 3 kids and as many grandkids as possible. Family for him is number one, and that's my dad. It's just the perfect couple.
So Amir, you're never lacking love then.
No,
Have you always
no,
had love? Always?
I believe so. I mean, I'm a middle child, so remember we have that
Yeah.
syndrome
Yeah.
that they only know our name when they need something. Uh,
Right.
but it's it's one of those. I'm very fortunate to come from this family. Very fortunate, and we were just in Italy to celebrate my mom's 80th.
Yes,
It
Mazel tov.
was me. It was my new wife Melanie, whom you met.
Yes.
My sister, my brother-in-law, my brother, and my sister-in-law. And we sat at the end of this one week in the south of Italy, and my mom wanted to thank everybody for doing this for her. And we realized yet again how lucky we are to have the kind of family we have.
Yeah.
So We may scream and yell every 5 minutes,
Of
but
course.
it's always gonna end up with a big hug.
So you know how to love as well. You're a good dad.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. That's a question to for my daughter or for
Not
Melanie.
entirely. Not entirely. You know if you're a good dad or not.
I try to be. I try to be a good dad every day. I try to be a good person every day. I think I sin every day.
Yeah.
I think I fail every day, but at
Welcome
least I
home.
try. Yeah, at least I.
Welcome home. How's before we get into your film, which I'm really excited about talking about. How's the new marriage? How long's it been?
6 years.
And how is it?
I I always tell her that she married up, but I think it's very obvious that I married up.
Yeah,
It's very obvious. She's just she is wonderful.
she is.
She knows me inside and out, and it's very frustrating.
Right, right.
I mean, she makes decisions for me. She runs my life, and I think I enjoy it.
Very good. Very
She,
good.
she's very smart. She's also a surgeon, a very, very smart woman, and comes from a great family.
So it sounds like you're mabsut. You're satisfied.
My mom tells me I am.
I think you are.
I think I am.
And you have a very happy face, which is nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have a great smile. So, one of the quotes which really grabbed me when I was studying up on you and the film that you created is you said, "I'm a big fan of biblical epic stories." And you added to that your connection to the state of Israel, where you were born and raised, inspired, and where you did some of your studying and work. I am also a very, very big fan of the Bible, of the biblical characters, and of the stories as well, be they epic or not. Tell me in your own words, what is it that grabs you about these biblical stories?
Number one, the story itself.
Mhm.
I was always a big epic Bible story kind of guy. It was one of my favorite classes in school. It was this, English, and gymnastics, or PE. Um, I like the costumes. I like the stories. I like the swords. I like the simplicity of the story itself, but on the same time, the godly intervention of every story. I was always attracted to that. It's some of my favorite films would might be the Ten Commandments, which is obviously, of course, a biblical story. Prince of Egypt,
Yep.
Disney's animation. But even if you take it away from Bible, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, it's all epic. It's all big. It's all grand. I think the characters look the best, and the story is always fantastic, and it's completely you cannot really relate to it unless you're a dreamer like myself.
And,
You know,
and you believe in God?
I do.
Can you tell me about your relationship with God? It'll help me understand your relationship to your film more so.
My relationship to God became a lot stronger after my divorce.
Mhm.
Um, I realized that everything that has happened to me in life, I knew prior to it happening that it's going to happen. I knew it. I absolutely knew it, which kind of got me closer to the idea of God. Whereas before, it was an automatic thing. Of course, I believe in God. I'm Israeli. I'm Jewish. We go to synagogue. We fast. Of course. But none of that meant anything to me because I didn't feel it. And I had many conversations with many, many people about that. But I think it's when I went through this whole divorce process, which was not a difficult one, by the way. I got very lucky. Something happened, and I became a very big believer. I don't preach about it to people because it's not of my business. I think it'll come from within as opposed to without. And that inspired me even more that it's time to execute this specific screenplay and do it in a much better way, which yet again tells me that everything happens exactly when it should happen. So when
You know,
people tell me, oh, if you had done it before, I said, no, I did it exactly at the right time.
mhm, mhm. Do you have
Yeah,
personal dialogue with God?
I do.
The pregnant pause there.
I do. I have it. I I I make sure you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yes, I make sure to thank God at least once a day.
Yeah.
When I feel like it, when I want to, when I feel that it's necessary. Not because I want something in return. I want nothing in return. I just feel it. I can tell you that I'm a very lucky man.
Yes, I can see that, and I can feel it as well. Is there anything about you which is Jewish?
Everything about me is Jewish.
Ah, good answer.
Everything. Everything. I was born Jewish. I was born Israeli. I'm a very proud Israeli. I'm
Yes.
a very proud Jew. And it'll always stay like that. That's what I try to instill in my daughter as well. We're Jews, we're Israelis, we're Americans too. I'm very
Yeah.
grateful to America. America is my second home. It's my first home today. I'm very grateful for this country and I'm grateful for Israel, but I'm everything about me is Jewish. Everything.
One of the things that I was wondering about when I was watching your film and studying it a little bit, your commitment to the biblical story, hence the biblical characters, is very strong. And what I determined was that you wanted it to be almost exact as possible. I mean, we don't know what happened in the times of Joshua specifically, other than the narrative from the book itself.
Right.
But you had the responsibility, at least in part, of determining who the voices would be for Joshua, for Moses, right? And the
Right.
other characters in the story.
Right.
Well, was that harder because it is biblical? Because Moses, stands out in our minds as someone who loved the biblical characters, as a giant of a prophet, the greatest that ever lived. When you were pairing up the voices, was that a challenge to you because of that?
Yes. The challenge was I wrote the original screenplay. My director, Tony, who's a great director, came on board and then we rewrote the screenplay. The biggest challenge is what am I hearing when I write it as opposed to what he's hearing when he writes it? What am I seeing as opposed to what he's seeing? So we concluded that we're going to do the casting and we're both going to decide if we like the voices, if that's what we're hearing. As far as the visualization, we decided that it's going to be what I visualize. And it worked. The challenge was, as I told Tony at the time, I said, I've already seen this movie about 1,000 times. Before we even went to production, I've seen it in my head. I wrote it. I said, I hope you can direct it in a way that's going to be 80% true to what I've seen. And he really did a great job because, again, part of it, he was the co-writer. But the challenge was to translate that, what we wrote, into animation. The character development took a little bit of time because you have to look at the character with whatever the book of Joshua offers, and then you have to decide what would the character do, as opposed to the writer telling the character what to do, if that makes sense.
It does.
And also at the time, because I was the solo writer at the time, there's only one voice, which is mine. So how do I have Joshua say something and Moses says something and then Rahab, and they all sound different? It's only me talking, really. So I had to think, what would Rahab do? What would Moses do? What would Joshua do? And I had to think about the character itself. And that's how I developed those characters at the time. So the biggest challenge is the character development and the dialogue.
When you were casting for Moses' voice, and that's a really important point, his voice,
Right.
because his character is animated,
Right.
which is another struggle to figure that out.
Right.
Do you remember that moment that you found Moses?
I do. I listened. We had over 1,000 submissions for all the characters.
Yeah.
We had hundreds for Moses. Hundreds. Everybody wants to play Moses. And
Of course.
oh, it was Everybody wants to be Moses. Everybody wants to be Joshua, you know?
Yeah.
And I listened to so many variations of Moses. And what I did, I decided at some point to block the image, because you see the image of the character, or you see the video of the character, right? Of the actor. And at some point, I took a piece of paper and I blocked the image completely. And I said, I'm not looking at the performance. I need to listen to the performance. And I went to bed and I said to myself, what does Moses sound like to me? And then it hit me. So when I replayed all the auditions, I got it. And this guy was perfect to what I thought would be Moses. And I ran it by Tony, and Tony said, absolutely. And that's really how we casted everybody.
So Amir, you give them perhaps 3 adjectives, if you will, for how Moses is or was in your mind. What were you looking for in that voice? What did you find?
I wanted wisdom, power, age, experience. That's the power of Moses. He's not physically a big man, but
Yes.
his character is big. He's so well respected. He is the link between the Israelites and God. He's the one that tells them what God said. He's that grand. So he needed to come in with experience, you know? He's not to me, he's not Joshua. Joshua has, in Hebrew, we say Joshua has to stand on, he has to be watered quite a bit to grow to be Moses.
Yes.
You know, Moses is already there. And when he opens his mouth, people listen, and very carefully. And that's what I needed. But we also need to understand that he's also dying. And he is of age. So I was trying to make it like that. And his appearance, in many ways, you also cater to the audience. You have to. The audience has an idea what Moses looks like. They have expectations. So you have to play it in many ways safe. This is what I think he would look like. He would be an older man with white beard and white hair. That's what I would think. Is this the traditional what Moses would look like? Of course it is. But it worked.
He was also very strong. Physically, he seemed very strong.
Yes. And all of that is part of character development. If you see, I'm a big fan of creating characters that everything we see on the character makes sense. There's a reason for everything. When I created, I know you didn't ask that question, but because we're talking about characters.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I created on the first scene, the evil priest, right? Why is the priest so scrawny? Why does he have these black eyes? And why does he have this crazy fertile hair? And, you know, and I realized, well, they drink blood, and nutritionally, he's not, very healthy. Why the black? He's got raccoon eyes because he's got some disease. Everything from a medical standpoint made sense why this guy would look the way he looks.
Was he the one with reddish in his eye?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He had conjunctivitis.
Is that what it was?
So everything made
pink eye.
Yeah. Scrawny, very, very ill. He's just a very ill guy. The king is very big and very fat because that's all he does. He eats.
And no teeth. No teeth.
That's right. That's right. So everything kind of made sense when we designed the characters. Rahab and Sharon, who is a fictitious character. I don't want to reveal too much, obviously, but it was quite a ride.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about that. The biblical characters are very specific when you study, say, for Yoshua, the book of Joshua, which I've done. You added a character or two, actually two, right. I think, right?
Right.
Was that difficult for you?
Yes and no. It's almost like, do we really know what Moses told Joshua? Do we really know the relationship Joshua had? Do we really know what the spies spoke to the king of the Amorites, or what they spoke to the king of Jericho? Do we really know the dynamic between Rahab and Moses, Rahab and Joshua? We really don't. I read the book so many times, and I made educated guesses on what I think could have happened or would have happened, as long as I did not stay away from the actual story. So adding this one or two characters did not change the story. It only added more reasons for certain characters to do what we know they did in the book of Joshua, in the actual story. So it kind of helped me execute what the story is about and how it played out.
Rahab, the prostitute,
Yeah.
right? Did you get to like her as a person?
My favorite.
Why?
It's funny. I told my daughter that I'm going to model one of the characters after the way she looks. Neely, my daughter, looks very much like Rahab, not in an animated way. And I said, Neely, I'm going to model my lead character after you because you're so beautiful. And she goes, really? Who is this? And I said, that's Rahab. And she goes, wasn't she a hooker? I'm like, oh, yeah, she was, actually.
It's one way of saying it. Yeah.
One way of saying it.
Yeah.
Because to me, looking like Rahab and surviving in that era in the way she did takes a very strong woman. And Rahab, it was very important for me that even though she was a prostitute according to the Bible, which we really don't know what that means yet, we have ideas what that means today, but then we don't. Some people say prostitute only meant that she owned a wine bar. So I put her down as owning an inn, right? She was clearly something else as well. But she was such a strong character that in today's world, she would have been a president, a leader, somebody very, very strong. And that's exactly how I wanted her to be portrayed. And she was kind, but she could have been very vicious as well. And she's very open-minded, clearly, with the way she helped the Israelites.
It's very interesting when she decided that she wanted to leave the Israelites camp. Somebody stood in front of her and she said, I've grown up in this land. I know how to get home safely. Yeah. And it was really a narrative which was reflective of her great strength as she portrayed her. And as the book of Joshua does as well, a very strong woman.
Yes. And she is by far my favorite character, and played by Mary Jameson, very talented actress, and who did such a fantastic job and really brought this character to life.
Do you see the characters within the voiceover people? The fellow who did Moses, is he actually a wise fellow?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he is, but again,
you just don't know them.
I don't know them. I just wanted to listen to them. So I could care less what they looked like, where they're from, what their religious beliefs. I wanted to know, am I listening to Moses? Am I listening to Rahab?
Yes.
So every single time we had some actors that played several characters because they did such a great job. And it just made sense. Some of the kings, say the king of Jericho, same thing. I mean, it made sense. He sounded like exactly the king that both Tony and I wanted him to sound like. So
how do you create an animated movie? What's the process of doing it so that you can see scene by scene by scene, so that you can see the characters? I've never done it before, so I don't understand animation. How do you do it?
So, of course, you have the screenplay, and then you break it down to shots. And then Tony would hand illustrate, which looked awful, to the animation department, the angles of the camera. And he would run it by me, and I said, I kind of like those angles. Maybe we should change some angles, and then we'll send it to have animatics created. And that's all done by pencil. Now the animatics is created. So, for example, as you're looking at me right now, let's assume this is a scene. Somebody would draw you and draw me. And let's say I do this with my hand, they would draw it like that because that's the action, right? Once we approve, now we go to color. What are they wearing? What is Amir wearing? And then we like it. And then we go to animation to see if we like the movement. Now, in 2D animation, sometimes the movements are kind of the same. So we got to tell them tone it down a little bit because it's the same kind of movement. And then we move the camera to another angle and we have to do the same thing. Hand draw everything. Then they go to animatics. Then we approve. Then the costume design. Then we approve. And then we go to animation. To all that, we have to match the sound. Because remember, animation has no sound.
Yes.
We have to create everything, footsteps, the wind, the rain, everything we have to create from nothing. So we have to do that. Then we got to take our composer, who was fantastic, and match her music to the action, or send her the scene and whatever makes sense to her. So everything has to come together like that. But that's animation.
So you had some war scenes in the film, in
Yeah.
the movie. What were your visions? How did you see the war scenes coming to fruition?
The war scenes were very challenging because, again, a lot of people, a lot of characters in one scene. I wanted the war scene to show bravery. Bravery. I wanted to show some type of hesitance beforehand. I wanted them to believe. I needed my characters to believe. I needed to believe myself.
To believe in
God, to believe
God.
in their victory, to believe that what they're doing is the right thing, that this is what they were called upon to do for a reason. So I needed them to absolutely believe, which kind of led me. It was a one big buildup until the walls of Jericho. It was a huge buildup of faith. Because remember, they were nomads. And as nomads, they had no faith. You know, we can get to that with God's chosen people and why Jews are called God's chosen people, which got us in trouble throughout history. That's because people misunderstand what that means. But for the sake of the film, I needed them to believe. And that's why those battle scenes had to be very quick and to the point. Also, of course, there are other constraints of time and money and so on and so forth. But we did what we could with what we had. But the point was to show faith.
It's very interesting. You said that in an interview that you actually toned down the violence of the Torah, of
I did.
Tanakh. And
I
I'll
did.
tell you something. I went through the yeshiva world.
Mm.
And there's sort of a belief within the yeshiva world amongst some that these books are not taught to some extent because they're so bloody. And you decided to tone it down. And in your literature, it even says that this is for the entire family.
Right.
Is it? Is it for the entire family?
I think it depends on the family.
Granted, yes.
It really depends on the family because before the movie came about, I made a graphic novel of this. The graphic novel ends with the Amorites War. So it's 1/3 of this film. And in this graphic novel, I'm showing a lot of skin on Rahab. No nudity whatsoever, but a lot of skin. And the graphic novel, and I'll send it to you, is a lot more aggressive, a lot more violent than this movie.
Mm-hmm.
People could care less about the violence, but they cared more about skin on Rahab.
Well, that was the Christian group you showed it to. And then you said the Jewish Jew. I love the way you said this. They didn't really care about anything.
They didn't.
What is that all about?
I have no clue. I don't know because I don't think it's that violent. I mean, yes, I mean you got some blood, but this is the Bible. I'm animating the Bible. Yeah. So if you know, at least what I'm doing, I think, is I might even be telling you this is what happened, so you don't have to let your imagination go even more wild. Whereas when you read the story itself, your imagination can go as wild as you want it to go. Right? So I did tone it down quite a bit. When I first wrote it, it was intended for live action. But live action was a little bit above my league at that point. So animation made sense, and I had to tone it down because it is for young adults, for kids, you know?
I mean, there is a point in the film where the king gets a spear in his eye.
Right.
And that's pretty gruesome. And I was wondering to myself, did Amir do a double take on that or on other scenes? Did you think to yourself, maybe that's a bit much, or perhaps we should do a bit more?
There are a couple of scenes, and again, I don't want to reveal too much, but there are a couple of scenes that would definitely be borderline aggressive, but they're not any more aggressive than your typical PG-13 animation that I've seen before.
Okay.
You know, when I was dealing with ranking, they kind of tell you how they rank, right? It's not necessarily the action of a lot of it is just the sound, you know, the sound of the action that can lead them to say, "Oh, that was really aggressive," you
Yeah,
know.
right, right.
But it's again depends on the family.
Yeah, granted. I want to talk a little bit about Jericho and the Jericho scene because really that's in many ways the crux of the whole story. Just
Right.
a couple of points about Jericho itself. It's an ancient settlement. Jericho is one of the oldest known cities in the world,
Right.
with archaeological evidence of settlement dating back to around 9000 BCE, making it a key site in human history. It's a biblical location, as we know, found in the Jordan Valley near the Jordan River, described as the city of palms. It had a great strategic importance. Its position near a major river crossing and a fertile oasis made Jericho a strategic and prosperous city, serving as a gateway to the promised land for the Israelites. Now, modern day Jericho, today, Jericho is a Palestinian city in the West Bank, known for its historical sites, agricultural productivity, and proximity to the Dead Sea, maintaining its ancient legacy. There's nothing more epic than the story of Jericho. How did you go about creating that?
That was talk about fears. That was the most difficult thing to do, to execute something that is so heavenly and godly. They did not take the walls down. God did. And I just gave myself the liberty to show the world how he did it. And I wasn't even there. So I had to think. I had to study. I had to study the land. I had to study the Bible to make sense of things. Um, Taking the walls down means a lot to me in many ways. When I was a soldier, my captain once said, "There is no wall that you cannot climb over if you really want to."
Mhm.
And I remember that. I've repeated that sentence many, many times to many, many people. Taking the walls down was not about the sword, it was about faith. But how did those walls come down? How can I translate the power of God into the camera so people can see that it is the power of God? And that was the biggest challenge in this film. It's something that when we got to that point of animating that scene, I had to sit with my director and talk about it and think about it and explain to him how important and epic this scene. And even until today, when we show the scene and we look at the scene, which is a very long scene because it took time, it's still not exactly where I want it to be.
Mhm.
I'm proud of it, but it's not where it needed to be because of the limitations of animation. The scene itself, which is still in my head, is it's an epic scene, which personally means a lot to me.
Well, when you say that you studied the book again and again and again, you studied the land. Am I to understand from that? Did you go to Israel to study the land? Did you make any trips to have a better understanding of the lay of the land?
Well, I've lived in Israel pretty much half of my life. I know the land very well. I studied the land as I was writing that specific scene. I've spoken to people. I've spoken to people that can tell me about Tell me about earthquakes. Tell me about tornadoes. Tell me about hurricanes. Is it
Mhm.
possible that all that came together? What can I show that from a natural standpoint, something happened? Something happened that took those divine walls down, because no human can take them down. You cannot take them down, right? My captain one time punished us and he said, turn around. And he showed us a building and he goes, I want this building in the air in 5 minutes. Nobody can lift it. Absolutely no one can lift it. And he said, until this building is in the air, true story, nobody goes home. And I stood up because I was in charge at the time of the young soldiers. And I told him, I said, all right, listen, I get the joke, but nobody's going to lift this building. And he looks at me and he goes, try. And we actually tried. When I tell you that Amir grabbed a building, and we tried to lift it. And when he realized that we're actually trying, that was good enough for him, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Nobody can lift it. And that was the whole thing with the scene of Jericho. How can I show that they believe so much and then let God do what God does? So that's why the scene was so epic. That was to me the closure of now they believe. Now there's no question about it. Whereas before they questioned it.
Your faith is very, very powerful, isn't it?
It is.
How powerful is it?
I don't know how to measure it. I don't think one can measure.
Do you think God plays a role in your day to day life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every second of my life. Every second. I even asked that question to one of my rabbis one time, and he told me yes to everything. And I said, "Do you really want to tell me that God knows what I think?" And
Yeah.
he said yes. I'm like, "Oh, I'm in trouble then."
I know I'm in trouble too. I know we're screwed.
Yeah, and I'll take it. And I'll take it.
Amir, there's so many dimensions to this film that you've created so beautifully with your colleagues, your staff, the donors, the people who put money into it. You
Yeah.
truly did a beautiful job. I was looking at the graphics. You had some what we would call in the industry crane shots, just
Mhm.
stills of Jericho. Beautiful artwork. I'm an artist, and I really appreciated it.
Thank you. They the studio that we worked with did such a fantastic job. They're
Yeah,
so
yeah,
talented. They listened to everything we wanted and how it's done. I have to mention my composer as well,
yes.
Daniela Kor, out of Moldova.
Mhm.
Took some of Hans Zimmer classes, and she knocked it out of the park. I mean, that music was just something else. So
Beautiful.
everybody came together. They knew that they're about to be part of fulfilling my dream. They knew it, and that's exactly what they did. And I can't thank them enough.
It must be crazy for you to watch the film now because you don't watch it like a normal person, right?
No,
You hear the music, you see the artwork, you see the animation, you see the questions you had in the creation of it. Like you just can't watch it, right?
it's just it's tough.
Right.
When we did when we did the premiere, I'm sitting in the middle, and once it starts playing, of course, it was very exciting to see Parting Seas Productions, which, by the way, I named my production company Parting Seas Productions
Yes.
because, like parting the seas, which is an impossible task, my job is to do the seemingly impossible, make it possible.
Mm.
Again, confronting challenges. So there's a thought process behind everything. But anyway, I'm watching this movie in the premiere. 200 of my friends and family show up, and we start playing it. And when I tell you that it was the longest movie I've ever watched in my life,
For sure.
I'm like, this has to end. This has to end. I mean, I hope somebody's going to turn off the electricity. Some fire alarm is going to go off. This is the worst film I've ever seen. And I'm at the end, I'm like, I'm just going to disappear. If there's like an eject button, I would just eject myself out of here.
Yeah.
People loved it. And I drive home and I tell my wife goes, it was an incredible movie. And I said, Melanie, you're my wife. Of course you're going to say that. And all of them are my friends and my colleagues. Of course they're going to say that. Whatever. And then before you know it, We're winning the Hollywood Film Festival.
Yeah.
We're number 3 in the International Film Festival. I mean, we're nominated. I mean, we're getting great reviews, and I'm like, oh, maybe it is a good film.
Can
So
you say that actually? Like, do you have that inside of you that you can pat yourself on the back and say, "Way to go, Amir"?
absolutely,
You can do that.
absolutely. And the more I watch it today, the more I love the film. Naturally, there are things I'm like, well, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. But I have rewritten the screenplay about 1,000 times. Every time I read it, I want to rewrite something. So at some point you say, let's execute. And I'm so proud of this, of the story itself. I'm grateful that I had the privilege of making this movie with the help, again, with the help of my director and my cast and my crew, with my wife, with my daughter, with my family, with everybody around me, my friends. Everybody helped me. I did not do this on my own. And I'm very grateful.
Were you any of the characters?
Initially, I was.
Yeah.
And then I heard myself and I told Tony, that guy, recast him.
When you say you were, does that mean you used your voice initially? Is that what you meant?
Initially, yes. One of the characters, I wanted to use my voice. The warrior that I am, I felt it. But then when I heard my voice with the character, I called my director and I said, Tony, listen, the quality of this film is more important than my ego. And that's coming from an Israeli. So trust me, take it when I tell you that.
Yes, I do.
Recast this guy.
Yeah.
And he's, yeah.
My question was a little bit different though.
Oh,
Are you in any of the writing?
yes, I am.
Where?
And any of the characters, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm in Joshua.
Oh, you are in Joshua.
Yeah.
So what do you see in Joshua that you see in yourself?
I see a man that, like myself, second guessed himself many, many times, not knowing if he's worthy of something. And others thought he was, and he accepted and took it and championed his way to the top.
Mm.
That's what I see in Joshua. And
Good for you.
that's the guy. That's the guy that I always was, and that's the guy that a long time ago, my father said, if you didn't have the potential, I would understand. But because you do have the potential, and I heard it so many times in my life. So that's what I see in Joshua. So yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. In conclusion, I want to ask, there are so many dimensions to this film. I can see myself watching it many times and learning something different each time that I watch it. What, in the wee hours of the night when you're lying in bed and you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to create this film about the story of Joshua and the breaking down of the walls of Jericho, what were the things that you wanted the viewer to take away from it? What were you trying to teach us?
Well, first and foremost, I wanted to show a piece of art, a piece of animation to people that don't want to bother reading the Bible, or those who did and they want to see it now visually as opposed to what they imagine. But to me, the book of Joshua, the walls of Jericho, is really making the seemingly impossible possible. I picked this film for many reasons, one of which is that I'm Israeli, a former combat soldier. That's the story that talks to me. I love the book of Joshua. But really, as I dove more and more into it, it's more about how can I portray struggles and overcoming struggles through a biblical story of faith.
Mhm.
And to me, that is probably the number one story for me that can portray that. And I want people to take faith out of this and no boundaries, and always tackle what you're afraid to tackle. And like Eleanor Roosevelt once said, always do this, always do the impossible.
Yes.
If
Very
you
good.
think you cannot do it, do it.
Amir, I've been playing around with AI for a few months, and I've been asking AI to create poems about my guests. So I now have an ode to Amir Kovacs. You want to hear it?
I do.
It goes like this. In the heart of a tale where faith meets the flame, Amir Kovacs weaves a story of fame. With Book of Joshua, Walls of Jericho, he crafts a cinematic journey through the past. From Egypt's chain to Canaan's embrace, 40 years of struggle, God's promise to trace. Through famine and sorrow, the faithful endure, led by Joshua's courage, their triumph secure. Amir the dreamer with visions so bold, an actor, a writer, a producer of gold. He paints with light on the biblical stage. Jericho falls, a UNESCO turned page. In animated hues, the walls crumble down, a tale of devotion, earning festival crowns. Best animated film in Hollywood's glow, nominated 5 times where faith stories flow. Eleanor's words guide his resolute creed. Do what you think you cannot, his deed. With courage and heart, he builds what seems far. Amir Kovacs, a storyteller, a star.
Wow.
Nice,
Can you
eh?
send that to me?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Yeah. Isn't it
Thank
nice?
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I like this stuff. I know.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to use AI in a time where I benefit greatly from it because I know there's going to come a time where we won't. So I'm using it a lot in this context. So yeah, I'm happy that you liked it. Can you tell us where people can watch the film?
Yes, the film will be released June 3rd on Fandango, Apple TV, Amazon, and we're going to find out some more platforms. But for now, Amazon, Apple TV, Fandango, June 3rd is the official release date.
Yeah, and its genre is action, family, faith, animation, and it is in surround sound, right?
It's in surround sound, absolutely. 2D animation, 12 frames per second. They can also find us on Instagram, on Facebook, for all the updates and news, etc.
Amir, I really enjoyed talking with you, schmoozing with you. I love what you've created, and I love the way you've directed your own life. So, as they say in Hebrew, kol hakavod. Very well done.
Toda rabba. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this.
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed it too, and I'd love to stay in touch if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I already saved your number and your email, and I'm going to shoot you a text right after this.
Good. I think we have a nice energy going. So I want to thank my listeners as well as my viewers. And as I do at the end of most of my shows, I ask you to take out of the show something that will benefit you, so that you will be inspired by our guest today, Amir Kovacs. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, that Amir has done so well in his life, as I say, Admei Esrim, until 120, is he's pivoted. Yeah, he's clearly not an architect, but he has a diploma. You know, he's not a doctor, but he graduated as one. And he's a filmmaker, and he does that very, very well. I think it's extremely important in our day and age that if you're doing something where you're coming home at the end of the day and you're just so unhappy, just so tired, then think to yourself, what was I put on this earth to do? Why am I here? What is my personal gift? Well, and many people will have the predilection of, what did God give me in order to make our world a better place? Really think about that thing that makes you passionate. Sometimes I say to people, you know what? Walk through the library and see where you stop in the stacks, because that's good way of monitoring what areas you are interested in, right? It's one way of doing it. There are many other ways. But really, really sit down and gauge your response to life, to the world in which you live, to what others do, like Amir Kovacs, and say to yourself, oh, damn, I'd like to make films too, you know. So yeah, do that. Anyways, folks, thank you once again. Until we meet again, as they say in Zeigezint. Do you speak Yiddish, Amir?
I can understand it.
Okay, there you go. Do you have any concluding words before we leave?
I just wanted to thank you, and I wanted to thank your audience for giving me the time to talk about the film, talk about myself, introduce myself to your community. And I hope we get to do this again. And those of us who are going to catch the film on any of the platforms, I hope you enjoy it and get something out of it as well. And I'm always available on social media. If anybody want to reach out, I always answer.
Okay. Thank you so much, folks. Until we meet again.